I am so excited to be bringing you this podcast episode of the Empowered by Design podcast. I have a very special guest with me today talking about sex. Woo! It's going to be a fun one. I am going to be introducing you to psychologist and sex therapist, Dr. Lindsey Brooks. Stay tuned. Welcome to the podcast, Empowered by Design. I'm your host, Dr. Liz, a licensed psychologist and owner of Visionistas by Design Wellness Boutique in Nazareth, Pennsylvania. This podcast is about the power of connection and a proactive approach to mental health and overall wellness. It's about finding and owning your power right now and using it for good, by nurturing the connection of body, mind, heart, soul, and spirit. Empowered by Design podcast delivers psychological concepts and practical strategies with a real-life approach, designed to empower health and wellness, optimal performance, authentic connection with yourself and others, and purposeful, joyful living. Be well. Live empowered. Dream, design, deliver. Dr. Lindsey Brooks is a sex therapist turned sex educator. She has her Ph.D. in counseling psychology, is a certified sex therapist, and has been providing therapy since 2005. She is thrilled to now be bringing her knowledge beyond the therapy room with Sexual Empowerment School, where she teaches women how to let go of sexual shame, build their pleasure knowledge, and learn sexual communication skills through her online workshops and resources. Welcome, Lindsey. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. How are you?
I'm so great. Thanks so much for having me. I'm so excited to reconnect with you and to talk about stuff I know we're both passionate about.
Yes, and I love that you're clapping your hands. I do that all the time.
I'll be doing that a lot.
We're so excited. We're so excited. Yes, we are. Well, I love that even that you said reconnect, because this podcast is all about connection and we go way back. So I love to just kind of tell the listeners how we have connected and reconnected. I love this. So Lindsey and I graduated from the same counseling psychology graduate program at Lehigh University years ago.
Back in the day. I don't know if you want to say how long ago.
Back in the day. And so we are reconnecting. We have been following each other's careers and have both really talked about the our overlapping passion for empowering people, empowering women to really embrace themselves, embrace their bodies, embrace their love for themselves, and to be able to also share that love in their relationships, romantic and friendships and family relationships. And I have been loving seeing the programs that you're creating. I follow you on Instagram and so excited for this conversation. I cannot wait to see where it goes today. I'm so excited. Just so excited to reconnect with you.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me. I know it's a taboo topic, so it's brave to broach it. So thanks for doing that.
We love taboo topics here at Visionistas. We love it. Yes, because why? Why do we have to have a taboo topic, right? This is something so important to us, sexual health, and learning how to, like you said, I love the things that you said in your bio of, letting go of sexual shame, building pleasure knowledge, right? So really being able to get in touch with what feels good and what doesn't feel good, because if we don't know for ourselves, then we're not able to adequately or clearly communicate that to other people as well, that may be also in relationship with us. And then also the sexual communication skills. I love it. So we are going to get into all of that. Don't you worry and don't go anywhere, because this is going to be a fun episode. But I'm just going to open it up to you, Lindsey, and just tell us about yourself and the work that you do.
Sure. Yeah. Well, we've been on our therapist journeys together. So, the journey
Yes.
we've been on of becoming therapists and going into private practice and serving people in that way. And through that journey, I developed a specialty in sex therapy and have loved that work, especially with women. It's just so, I don't know the right word for it for me, but it's just so cool to see a woman go from feeling disconnected from her sexuality to feeling empowered and really understanding that important part of herself.
Yes.
And I just feel so honored when I get to do that work with folks and see that change in them and that they trust me to help them on that journey. So that's become my passion in my therapy work. But over time, I felt like, wow, I keep kind of talking with women about the same topics over and over, and I keep giving them similar education over and over. So I really want to be able to share this beyond just kind of that privacy of the therapy room. And I want this educational information to be more out there and accessible. So, that's what inspired me to start Sexual Empowerment School and to want to share this in, workshops, courses, more of those broader ways where we can reach more folks.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Unfortunately, most of us didn't get good sex ed growing up, if any at
if
all.
any.
So there's a lot of
Yes.
gaps to fill in, no matter how old you are,
Yes, absolutely. And I love that. And so this is a great conversation for any stage of the game, any age, any developmental stage. And
Yeah.
also, I love that you brought that up of the lack of clarity and that even that taboo nature brings the shame when we think about schools and the politics and what schools, some, parents don't want their schools to be teaching sex ed. But then, we know that it's not adequately covered in many households or families.
Right.
So even if this conversation helps you yourself, but also helps you talk to your children or your, if you are a teacher, your students about healthy and positive sexual behaviors and communication. Love it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's needed for everyone at every age. I work
Absolutely.
with people all different ages. And sometimes women will come to me and be like, oh, I'm in my 40s or my 50s. I'm embarrassed. I don't know this about myself, but it's never too late. And it's really, I would say it's a failure of our systems. And so not something for you to be ashamed about. So,
Right.
Start exploring it now.
Yeah. I also love that you talked about your transition or adding on, right? So the journey from going into private practice. So both of us come from a similar background, not only in school, but in going into private practice and really kind of starting out with that bulk of work in the therapy room. So loving the ability, and I think of, just how grateful I am to, like you said, to see the goals that get accomplished, and not just like goals sound so rigid, but it's like to see people enjoy life and make these connections and make better connections with themselves and others and just feel better. It's exhilarating. That was the word that was coming up in my mind. It's energizing, exhilarating, and it's beautiful to be able to be invited into someone's life the way that we are, with trust and safety. To be able to be on the journey in that collaborative way is wonderful. And then to be able to see how, like you said, when you feel like you're saying and delivering the same kind of tips and information and strategies, to say, how can I spread this to more people, right? Because typically that traditional therapy model is we're sitting one-on-one in a room for an hour-ish with one person, and it's like, okay, but how can I reach more people? How can I expand this reach? And so I love that attention to both of our passions in creating workshops and programs where we can kind of go beyond that privacy space, that one-on-one traditional model, and give this really important, helpful information to people wherever they are, in their living room or, driving in the car.
Right, exactly. Like people shouldn't have to, like, one, just be able to afford therapy or
Right.
have access to a therapist. I mean, there's so many limitations to finding someone and accessing it. And so there's so much information people need and deserve. So if we can like find more ways to share that with them, that's so important.
Yes, yes. I love it. I love it. So tell us about the school that you created, the Sexual Empowerment School. Tell us about that.
Yeah. Yeah. So Sexual Empowerment School came out of exactly that idea of like, okay, how can I share this information more widely? My main thing that I offer is a 8-week workshop series that really you go through the workshop and it all builds on itself to help you, learn about your pleasure anatomy, learn the things you need to know about your body, develop a sex positive mindset and strategies for that, and then work on sexual communication skills. So it's very interactive, that it gives you lots of information and then gives you lots of practical skills and things you can try in your everyday life. So I've been loving offering that it feels like I've been able to pull like those key nuggets that
Mm,
really I've seen benefit folks in the therapy room and take those and offer them in this new way. And one of my favorite things about it is it gives the women a space to connect with each other, right? So it's
mm.
not just, okay, me and them alone in a therapy room. There's the community aspect as well. And they get so much support from that and feel so seen in a way they never have before. That it's like, oh, okay, other women have gone through this or
Yes.
something similar.
It's like so validating to
Yes.
to be in a group format with people where they can say, "Oh my God, I'm not alone. This is not just happening to me, or this is not just my experience. It's
Yes.
it's transformative." I love that. I love
Yeah.
that.
So I feel like that's really like the magic of it.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Mm-hmm.
something that, I can bring them together, but it's the folks create it together in the community. That's something I can't just like make happen. I can just provide the space, and the folks who come together bring that magic, which is awesome.
Yeah. I imagine too that as people are listening, they're like, oh, it would be so scary to go and talk about sex in a group of other people. So how,
Uh-huh.
what is
Uh-huh.
that like for you? Do you find that to be a barrier? And if so, how do you help people kind of jump over that hurdle?
Sure. Yeah, I think it's natural people are a little nervous, of course, at first. But I think getting to know me a little bit helps. So with each person, we do a one-on-one call to answer any of their questions about the group. I really explain what it is and the ground rules. So I think them having a sense of comfort and safety with me helps. And then they know, okay, they can get all their anxious questions answered before the first day. I think that can help people take the leap. And also, when I go over the ground rules, one of it is, you can share as much or as little as you want. I never put anyone on the spot like, hey, you got to share. What's your reactions to this? I welcome people to share, but it's really their choice. And I have find just people having that freedom, then it allows them to feel safe to share what they want. And
Absolutely.
and I have just been shocked that once people get going, I think all of them share a lot more than they have expected.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. About it, and because when you establish those boundaries and that safety and the ground rules,
Mhm.
there's the privacy aspect is reciprocal in nature, right? If you're going to promise to keep things private and not go out and talk about other people's
Mhm.
shared experiences or experiences that they share, and
Mhm.
you are expecting that same respect in return.
Yeah. Yeah. So it seems to flow really naturally once I kind of just lay the foundation
Yeah, that's
for
wonderful.
everyone. Yeah. And I think having, it be a women only space also helps.
Mm,
It could be a
mm-hmm.
very different dynamic if we had all genders or if we had couples. And that's part of why I want to serve, only women identified folks, so that, I think, we have our unique um, experiences of shame and things, we're told often not to talk about sex or to suppress our desires. And so to create a space where it's like, okay, women have that safety with each other, I think makes a big difference as well.
Yeah. Absolutely. So when you think about the women that you serve, that you work with, what are some common things, common issues, common concerns that you would say people come to you with and
Mhm.
want to know more about or want to have some kind of help with?
Mhm. Yeah. Sexual shame is a big one. They may not necessarily call it that coming in the door, but that's what I see is the pattern often. So shame, fear of sex, being taught so many sex negative messages, even if they desire it, there can be a lot of fear based on those messages they've learned. Um, and then what they perceive as low desire, and I'm putting that in quotes for people who can't see me. A lot of women, kind of wherever they fall on the desire spectrum, often see themselves as having low desire and not enough desire. And for some reason that may be accurate, and some women they're actually in a very typical place on that spectrum, but they have judgment of themselves. And so I find often a lot of internalizing shame and therefore discomfort with exploring their sexuality can be what contributes to feeling, oh, I have low desire, I'm not interested in sex. So those things really intersect, I find.
Okay. So when you said you see shame, how do people describe it? So what are some of the most common symptoms or common concerns when someone calls or reaches
Mm,
out to you and says,
mm,
I think I need help because of this. So you're saying,
mhm. Yeah. So
like
they might,
low desire is one of
yeah.
them.
Yeah. Like I'm not as interested in sex as I think I should be. Or more often it's my partner's complaining.
Okay.
I am not
Okay.
interested enough in
I know.
sex.
I was going to say, if they're not interested, I'm wondering why they would even think they should come, but that makes a lot of sense.
Right. It's often causing tension in their relationship.
Okay. So
Um,
relationship tension.
yeah. Or they're not in a relationship and they're wanting to date and find a partner, but they feel like, but I'm not that interested in sex. And will that get in my way of finding a partner and finding connection? Um, so relationship is often a piece of it. The other common thing a lot of women come in saying is, I just don't know what I like. I feel disconnected from myself sexually. Like I want to experience more pleasure, or I want to feel more empowered, but like I just feel cut off from that part of myself and I don't know how to access it. So that's the other thing with relationships, I would say, is probably the most common one. There's some tension or discomfort in the relationship, or then there's this disconnect with myself. So those are more the words I hear from
Okay.
the folks I speak to. Um, and then as I dig deeper, I'm like, okay, shame is often what's underneath a lot of that.
Well, and how did you get into this? How did this develop? This specialty of yours develop?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I've just found I really love working with women around these topics. That, of course, I love working with people of all genders and think everyone should have sexual empowerment. But I just found that spark and that joy for me, particularly in that work, because I find so many women. I mean, they didn't even learn about their bodies. They were often told their bodies are like wrong or ugly, or it's wrong to even explore or touch yourself. Like I feel like there's just so many more layers for women of negativity that unfortunately they have had piled onto them.
Hmm.
And so helping them unpack all of that is just so rewarding. And so yeah, I just have really seen the benefits of that work, and selfishly I have gotten a lot of joy from it myself.
Okay. So here at Visionistas, one of our foundations, actually, yeah, one of our main foundations for the work that we do is helping people connect with themselves in all aspects
Mhm.
of health, and how we describe that and identify those different aspects is body, mind, heart, soul, and spirit.
Love that.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about if you personally, so we'll go to the work in a bit, but if you would tell us personally, which one of those really is the most resonating with you? If you would say, what leads me, or what am I led by? Tell us about that.
Body, mind, soul, and spirit. Ooh, it's hard to pick.
And heart, body, mind, heart, soul, and spirit.
Oh,
yeah,
boy.
It is hard
Okay.
to pick because they're great.
Yeah.
They're all important.
Well, I'm going to cheat my answer and say I can't pick one because I think my passion is the intersection. That I often say, like when I think about sex, it's like the ultimate kind of mind-body connection. Like it involves your body, obviously, right? But like your mind and the emotions, the beliefs you have about sex, your comfort level, all of that comes together for a positive sexual experience. And so you can't just like leave one or the other out. And so often all those other layers, like you're saying, the heart, the spirit, all of those things influence how we feel in our mind. So I'm always saying, like, you can't just pull one piece out. They all intersect. And so addressing all of them, I think is my passion.
It's hard to pick.
Yeah.
And-
But what am I personally led by? If I was forced to choose, I would say heart. I think this is heart work for me.
Yeah. Have you been dreaming of a makeover? Maybe a few highlights, a new outfit, brightening up your skin for this brand new season? Me too. I have the thing for you. But we are going a little bit deeper than a new pair of shoes. You will be amazed at how wonderful you can feel with a little TLC for your soul. You've heard this before. Beauty is not skin deep. Do you believe that? I do. So come a little deeper with me. Show yourself some love, some TLC, and magnify that inner beauty that's just waiting to be nurtured, rediscovered, and unleashed to brighten up this world. You know it's in there. I know it's in there. So head over to my website, drliz.com/makeover for your free self-love makeover. That's drliz.com/makeover. I can't wait to see you there. Let's talk about communication. What are some tips that you have that you can share with us and the listeners today of if communication is really a concern or a problem or scary for you, how can you help us with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I one of the practices I really help women with is figuring out first what you want, so then you can go into the communication more clearly. So one of the exercises I really love is identifying what you want to do sexually, what you will do. So what, like, maybe it's not at the top of my list, but if it's something my partner's really into, like, okay, I would like lovingly and happily do it, but it's not, my number one. It's not my I really want list. And then the third piece is the won't. So the things that I won't do. These are my clear boundaries, limits, hard things I wouldn't be open to. So it's like you kind of got to do some of that personal work on your own first before you can even communicate, so that you are like ready to go into that conversation. So helping them have clarity on those things. And then I think it's a little less scary to go into a conversation, because then you can broach it with, hey, I'd like to talk about some things I'm into and would like to explore, and I'd love to hear what you're into and you would like to explore. Can we have a conversation about that? And then that opens the door to look for, is there overlap between, our various lists, the things we both want or will do? And can we look for those areas of overlap and then explore how could we get ready to talk about those things? Okay. So that's a good way, I think, just to a framework to have an entry for talking about the sexual topics. And then for the actual just fear of like broaching it, right? The fear of even saying what I just said of like, hey, can we talk about our sex life? it can be really useful to say out loud before getting to the actual sex conversation, is to say, I'm feeling really nervous
Oh,
and
yeah.
scared about this. There's something really important I want to talk to you about. I think it would be like great for both of us to talk about it, but oh my God, I'm so nervous. Like finding your own, those are my, like, that's my nerdy way that I would say it.
Yeah.
Finding your own language to acknowledge, like, this is hard to talk about, and give your partner the opportunity to try to like lean in and like perk up and say like, oh, okay, they're really trying to share something important. Like, let me pay close attention.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that point because, and I would say right now, even inviting people who are listening to check in with yourself if you're still here, right? Because
Mhm.
sometimes sex can be such a scary topic that we avoid it, right? Like we
Yeah.
avoid it in our minds, we avoid exploring, we avoid talking about it.
Mhm.
These are all the things that we're saying. So that energy of like, oh, how do we do this is out there.
Mhm.
And we can feel it, and it can be really, really heavy, and it can get in the way of things that can be really beautiful and wonderful for connecting
Mhm.
ourselves and ourselves with our partners. So I
Mhm.
love that very basic tip of being able to acknowledge, like, sit with yourself
Yeah.
and just kind of, I close my eyes a lot to really just tune into my own experience in my body and
Mm.
what's going on for me, and if I'm feeling a little bit tense or nervous, usually it's my body that tells me
Yeah.
first. If my mind is like, what's going on here? I'll tune in, and then I can be like, okay, maybe I'm nervous, maybe I'm excited, but I have to really tune in
Yeah.
to myself in that way. And that is one of the things that I love helping other people do, is to
Mm.
tune in and going back to that whole body, mind, heart, soul, spirit, because
Mhm.
we have so much information that comes at us from all different angles, and sometimes it can be overwhelming.
Yeah.
So really just pausing and kind of tuning in with yourself. So even right now, as you're listening to us,
Mm.
noticing what comes up for you, what's uncomfortable, what's exciting, what's scary, and helping yourself use that information, even just listening to a conversation, let
Mhm.
alone having a conversation about sex. It can be really helpful to learn about, like you're saying, learn about yourself first, so that then you can go have a really secure jumping off point to talk about it.
Mhm. Yeah, I love that. That's a great point. That's kind of like before even step one is the checking in with yourself,
Yes,
tuning into
yes.
yourself,
Mm-hmm.
and getting clear on what are you feeling going into
Mm-hmm.
this conversation? What do
Yeah.
you need to take care of yourself? Yeah, but I love that. That's a great point you brought up, of like, even people listening right now, maybe feeling nervous of like, oh, listening to something about sex. Am I allowed to do that? Is that bad? Oh, what if someone sees I'm listening to this topic?
Yeah.
Even just
Yeah.
listening to something like this could be uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're feeling that right now as you're listening, I would encourage you, like you said, to check in with that feeling and maybe ask yourself where some of those messages may have come from. Because a lot of times we're feeling some discomfort around sex. I find I've internalized something from my family, from my culture, from religion, from an ex-partner, like from somewhere where I heard something negative, and now I'm kind of carrying that into how I feel about myself and my own sexuality.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that you brought up those different points, and encouraging people to use that to explore, when we think about the messages that we've received from early on in life, where they come from, right? Because we all have our own unique experiences based on family of origin, our peers, our peer
Mhm.
relationships when we were younger in school, or even school education,
Right. Yeah.
and society, right? That kind of underlying messages that you referred to earlier, to the sexualized nature of, whether it's It's actually an extreme. I wish I could
Mhm.
remember the video a couple years ago. It was definitely before pandemic. There was this amazing video that kind of showed and highlighted, I think it was on YouTube or one of the
Mhm. Sure.
platforms of like the mixture of messages. Be sexy, don't be sexy. Be strong, don't be strong.
Right.
Be like to women, right?
Mhm.
Women and girls. Be
Totally.
beautiful, don't be beautiful. Don't be too beautiful. Be thin, be curvy, right? Like
Right.
all of these messages. And it's like, what do I do? What should I do?
Exactly.
And
Yes. We're
yeah.
pulled in so many directions. How are you
Hmm.
supposed to make sense of all those messages?
Right. Right. And really it comes back to doing this soul searching kind of work, a
Mhm.
bit of really being able to tune in with yourself. Who am I? Who am I? Where do I come from? What do I value
Yeah.
personally? What do I want for myself right now? What do I want for myself in the future? And how do I kind of pull those things apart, right? Like
Mhm.
I love when you said the intersection, when we were talking about those aspects of health, of body and mind and heart and soul and spirit. The intersection is so important and beautiful, and there's such a reciprocity and connection between all of those things. Similarly with what's going on for us right now, where did that come from? Where are we going? It's helpful to pull those things apart, but then to put them back together and really be able to explore ourselves in that kind of entity realm.
Exactly. Yeah. To examine like, okay, what from, my family, how I grew up, cultural things, like what of that do I want to hold on to that I value and is still really important to me? And what have maybe I feel like I'm ready to question, or I'm ready to move to a new way of looking at things and exploring like, okay, those two sides of it. And so then therefore, what is the intersection now that feels
Mm-hmm.
good
Mm-hmm.
to you? And for a lot of women, I find that there was some mix of like a sex negative or sex shaming message they probably got along the way. And now they're beginning to question, like, wait a minute, could I just see sex as a normal part of my life, a normal part of the way I connect with a partner, or that I show love, or that I experience pleasure? And so figuring out how do all those pieces now fit together for them, I think is a really valuable process.
Yeah. I can you say those again? That was really, I really love that. And I'm like trying to remember them as you were saying them. How can we help people recognize that sex can be about connecting with
Mm-hmm.
ourselves, with our partner, showing love,
Mm-hmm.
and a way to experience pleasure?
Right.
Did I miss anything?
I think you got it all.
Like, that's
Right. But
wonderful. Yeah.
yeah, that
And
all of that is natural and normal, right?
yes,
And nothing
yes.
we need to be ashamed of or
Hmm.
push away. It's a part of the human experience.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's talk about those oppressive factors in society that that you see in your work, that we both see in our work, that we can
Mm.
help people understand better.
Yeah, definitely. Oftentimes it starts with family, and like the specific messages you got from your family, of course, are going to vary a ton based on your family's cultural background, region, all of those different things. So there'll be so many different examples. But a lot of them I hear are themes around like, oh, girls shouldn't have sex, shouldn't masturbate, shouldn't explore pleasure. Some idea of you need to remain pure and protect that part of
Mm.
yourself can
Hmm.
often be those early messages from family. Um, and those often can be tied to religious or cultural beliefs. So there can be those added layers as well. Um, particularly around religion, I think there's often that dichotomy of like the pure, um, virginal image versus the woman who does have sex is the whore, right? There can
Mm.
often be
Hmm.
that kind of language presented in different ways in different religions, and that can trickle down in the way that we talk to girls, right? Of just, I mean, starting as young as elementary school, right? Of like, what are they wearing, right? Oh, those shorts are too short. You shouldn't go out in the house in that. You should, what is the underlying message there, right?
Yeah.
That you're inherently sexual and that's bad, but you better cover it up and you better, not actually explore or experience that, right? So it's often those early messages are kind of messages of suppression.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that can send the message to women there's something wrong with their sexuality when it's just totally natural and normal. When you go through puberty, most people start to have interest in sex and wanting to explore pleasure, whether that's on their own or with a partner. And trying to make sense of, okay, I'm hearing these messages, I shouldn't do this, I shouldn't do this, but then I'm feeling this way in my body. It's very confusing to put it all together.
Yeah. Yeah, as you were talking, I was thinking about how there have been a lot of movements. I thought of the Me Too movement and a lot of things in the media that have allowed us or kind of invited a more open communication around sex and healthy sexual expression and unhealthy sexual expression or unhealthy sexual experiences. So really thinking about that, like you said, developing that community. And I think that was the Me Too movement was something that was so instrumental in developing, absolutely developing this awareness for community and connection in having been like born into a culture that can be oppressive and shaming of sex in general.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And that shame and secrecy can create a culture where, things like sexual assault can happen, right?
Yeah.
So that's a whole other topic for another podcast, but but to say, like, in its extreme forms, this kind of secrecy becomes extremely toxic and abusive. So we want to start steering things towards that side of empowerment. Can we shed light on sexuality and what healthy sexuality and communicating, these are my boundaries, these are my desires, where that is the norm?
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely.
That has a really important trickle down
Yeah.
effect.
Yeah. Yeah, one of the things that one of our newest programs here is called the Fun Love program. We have a workshop series that we talk about how to really make your love fun and healthy. And it's really important in that to recognize the importance of boundaries. So you and I have said the word boundaries a few times today. And I think it's just really helpful to sometimes outline what does a boundary mean to you? How would you, if you were just gonna kind of want to explain a boundary in as real life terms as it can be, how would you do that?
Yeah. I think about boundaries as like, I think of it as like the image of a box of like, okay, this is like the box that I am comfortable working within, right? If we're talking about sex, like these are the things I would enjoy doing, I'm open to doing, I'm willing and excited and wanting to do. And the things outside of it, those are my boundaries, right? I am not okay with, I don't know, just as an example, like spanking, right? I'm not okay with that in the bedroom. That's a boundary for me, right? So that doesn't mean spanking is necessarily bad, or if someone else enjoys that and everyone's consenting, great, enjoy and explore that. But for that individual person, oh, that's a boundary for me. I'm not comfortable with that. So that's something I'm going to communicate to my partner. That's a sexual behavior that's outside of that box for me. And so I think about boundaries as like, these are my limits. They're important to communicate to the other person. And they have their own boundaries that are going to be different from mine. And so we need to find a way to respect each other's boundaries and look for, oh, all right, where do our boxes overlap?
I love that. Yeah.
So that we can have that fun together.
Yeah. Yes. That is the important part of it, is like whenever we're thinking about, we would love fun to just, we think of fun as we laugh and we're excited and we're just enjoying our moments. And a lot of times the the reason that we can have fun is because there are boundaries that have been set. There are rules that have been set. And the way I describe it sometimes is, we have rules for safety. We know that when the light is red, we are stopping at the intersection, and we are trusting that other people know the rules and are following them too, or something bad can happen. And then when we are agreeing on those rules, then it can be fun, because there's not a fear, there's trust and there's safety there, and the fear is not there that something's going to happen that's not going to be safe. So absolutely, in all aspects of life, in relationships and communication in relationships, and how to take care of yourself and your partner in relationships, and absolutely an important part of when we think about sexual health in relationships. Boundaries can be are so important. Absolutely.
For sure. Yeah. And I think sometimes people think, oh, boundaries, that means it's like things are rigid and they can't be fun. But I feel like there's actually freedom in boundaries, because we both know within this box, within this space, we can move freely and explore and play. And that creates a lot more room than, oh, I'm not sure. And is this okay? Is this not okay? That can stifle us more. So having clear communication about the limits can create more freedom and fun.
Yeah. And also recognizing that you and I are obviously we're comfortable with talking. We went into that profession of being able to have verbal conversation, but recognizing there are other ways. If that's not the most comfortable way to communicate for you, it's important to find the ways that do work for you, rather than not communicating at all. And you're shaking your head. So yeah, tell me how do you help people in that way? If it's like, oh, it's too scary, I don't want to talk about it, or it's uncomfortable. What are some ways that you help people navigate those lines?
Yeah. Well, you can also use your non-verbals. So when you're like during a sexual interaction with your partner, right? I think it's really great to, like, with your sounds, with your body language, indicate you're enjoying something. So kind of letting them know, oh, I am into this. Keep doing this. keep going. So that can really help increase the things you like by letting them know that. And then you can also non-verbally convey, like, oh, that's a boundary. I want to change something. With like a, hey, I'm gonna gently move your hand someplace else, right? Or, hey, I would really like to try this, and you switch to doing something.
Okay, so moving your body into using your body to set boundaries. Absolutely.
Right. And certainly, I mean, I'm thinking of this in the context within like a trusting long-term relationship. I think that nonverbal can be a lot more effective. If it is a brand new partner you've never been with before, I think at least some verbal limits are needed, because, you don't know that person well enough to know, can they really read my cues, and can I trust they're going to pick up on them? So I think at least, if you have some particular hard boundaries that are important with a brand new partner, figuring out a way to say them, I think, is important. But once you have established trust and okay, this person is going to respect my boundaries, and they will pay attention if I'm using my non-verbals, I think that can be an excellent way if you're feeling like, ugh, it's still uncomfortable and hard to like continue those sexual conversations.
Yeah. And I think too, as if it doesn't happen in the moment, right? It's not comfortable to talk about in the moment, that to just say, do it later, right? Do it at some point. Don't avoid it forever. You can come back to something. And I think that is something that I see in my work commonly is, it's so uncomfortable that I never, people will say, I don't want to ever talk about it. I don't even know how to bring it up. And I don't want to bring it up after the fact because I don't want to start a fight, or I don't want to make things uncomfortable. But as we've talked about the importance of communication, whether that's via text or email or writing a note or talking verbally, right? There's lots of different ways to do that. And it doesn't have to be specifically in the moment. It can be afterwards, so that the next time there's a sexual encounter, the boundaries are clear, the rules are clear, I like this, I don't like this are clear, and being able to do that in different ways, than speaking.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. One other practice I recommend for, people who are in a long-term relationship is to create a jar where you're going to write down sexual things you were excited to do together.
Ooh,
So you wouldn't necessarily have to say it out loud, right? But
I
you can
love
write them
this.
on little slips of paper. And you don't even have to tell each other when you're doing it. Just when you have an idea, you put them in there. And then you can take turns pulling them out and reading them. And you can decide together, oh, are we both up for this? Is this on our I want to or I will list? But it's like you started by writing it down versus having to say it out loud. And that can open the conversation and be like, okay, it's a little less scary. It's already out there. They read it. And so now we can decide, are we both into this?
Yes, I love this idea. I'm like imagining it, how fun that can be. Fun, so fun because it's like a game. It can be a game. It can be fun. It can spice up a relationship when things feel maybe stale or things need to be bringing the fun back in. I love this. Oh, I'm going to use this. Yes, I love it.
Yeah. So that can be a fun thing of like, okay, we'll keep adding to it whenever either of us have ideas. And then like once a month, we're going to pull something out.
Something from the sex jar.
Right. That can be our date night.
Do you call it anything? Do you have a name for it?
I don't have a catchy name for it.
You need to trademark it. Oh, that's great. Yeah, because absolutely when we're talking about relationships, depending on, like you referenced, whether it's early on in the relationship or this is a relationship that has been, has been standing the test of time, though there are different concerns that can come up along the way. But this is a really neat way a fun and healthy way to be able to say, hey, I want to try this, or I would love to do this, and to then be able to talk about it, agree upon it, or, surprise each other with it. That's fun. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think just coming up with different creative ways where it's like, we're not ignoring sex. We are communicating about it. Doesn't always have to be with our words, but we can make sure it's something that like there's the door open to find a way to share with each other what we're both excited about.
What's the difference for you between someone who you would say, you know what, coaching would be this program, the sexual empowerment school coaching program is perfect for you, versus someone who maybe needs to or would benefit more from a therapeutic approach?
Sure. Yeah. Great question. Well, the first I would say, if you are experiencing any sexual pain, definitely would want you to work with a sex therapist first before you would do something like this. If you're noticing yourself having like very intense anxiety around sex, like you've been hearing this podcast, if you're feeling like, okay, it's not just I'm a little uncomfortable, but I'm feeling like my heart's racing, or maybe I'm going to have a panic attack kind of level feeling, talking about sex or approaching sex, then I would say sex therapy first. And then also, I know we mentioned, sexual assault, sexual trauma a bit. If you have had one of those experiences and feel like it is unresolved, like you haven't had support or worked through that before, I'd recommend working with a therapist first to get support. So those are the big three things. And a recommendation for folks, if they're looking for a therapist with expertise in this area, I recommend checking out asect.org. And I can give you the link for that. And so that's a place to find certified sex therapists. So people who are well-trained, lots of experience in these areas. So, you're getting the right kind of support.
Yes, thank you. Can you spell that? I will definitely link that in the show notes, but just for people who may be listening and driving or whatever, can you just spell that website, please?
AASECT. So
Great.
that's the American Association of Sex Educators and Therapists.
Great.
So that's a great place to find that.
Yeah.
But yeah, other than those three things, I would say, those would be the only reasons I would say start with therapy first. And otherwise, so many women can benefit from getting this education, information, and support, and that a lot of great change can happen with coaching and education, and that it doesn't have to be therapy for everyone. Like we were saying at the beginning, like there can be so much that can happen outside of the therapy room.
Yeah. And I think too, one of my favorite resources is the book, and we talked about this when we first talked about this podcast, is Come As You Are. The book by Emily Nagoski is an amazing, amazing resource that I use often in my work with clients who have any kind of sexual concerns, and we going to go through the book together. It's a really helpful resource that also comes from it actually incorporates health and wellness all around, and specifically also addresses mental health and also trauma and assault, and how to make sure that you're attending to all of those life experiences that can potentially contribute to these concerns that we're talking about today.
Absolutely. Yeah. I love that book. I recommend it. I feel like every single day. So I would say every listener, if you're curious about these topics, that's a great book and a great first place to start.
Absolutely. I think that is wonderful that you just said that. It is a really, really great place to start. So if you're feeling uncomfortable or you're just really curious about the things that we've been talking about today, it's a great book. I highly recommend it. I have it in print. I have the workbook. I have it on Audible.
Okay.
So it comes in all different forms, and she recently released a kind of a revised version with some new research. So
Great.
Absolutely check that out. Come As You Are by Emily Nagoski. A super great place to start if this is something that that feels like, oh, maybe there's more for me to know here about this and about myself. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I can share just a couple last tips. If you're listening to this and you're thinking, wow, maybe I am, still dealing with some negative feelings about sex or some shame about sex, and I'm not quite sure what to do or where to get started. My first tip would be to really just start practicing noticing when you're having those thoughts. Like if you're noticing, some sort of thought of like, oh, like sex is wrong or bad or dirty, or I should suppress this kind of feeling, just practice like, okay, that's a thought that I can notice. And I can see if I can notice it like a cloud passing by in the sky. Right? Like it's just because it's a thought that you had doesn't mean it's true or that you have to believe it. And so to get a little bit more space from those thoughts first, and just to begin to like monitor, like, okay, how often am I having these kinds of thoughts? Like, wow, I'm having to notice them like almost every day. They're pretty frequent. Like, or is it once in a while? Just to begin to kind of get a sense of how much of these negative beliefs you're carrying, and then to create some distance that you don't always have to believe that they're true. And so a really helpful skill for practicing that, like what I just described, I know it sounds easy, but it's very, very hard to do because we so like think quickly and move quickly in our everyday lives. But it's to practice mindfulness can be a really useful skill to help cultivate that, to notice and observe our thoughts. So I do have some resources on my website. If you go to sexualempowerment.school.com and look for mindfulness series, that's a series that helps you develop those skills specific to noticing any sex negative thoughts, and then also has some practices to help you begin to cultivate some more sex positive ways of thinking. So that's my first big tip. And then my second is to really surround yourself with other messages, surround yourself with people who are more sex positive. That, like we're saying, in general, society sends us a lot of negativity. So make sure you're creating space for more positivity around you. So like just listening to this podcast, I think is a great step towards that, right? You're listening to two women talk about sex in a positive way. So check out like, what are you doing on your social media? Like what messages are you getting from that? Like making sure you're being thoughtful about following some people with a more sex positive perspective. Notice your friends and the people you're surrounding yourself with. How do they talk about sex? Do they not talk about it at all? Does it seem shameful and quiet? Do they talk about it in a way that feels, negative and like it's bad? Or can they talk about it openly? Like it's just another part of life. And oh, I'm talking about my, relationship and my marriage. And oh yeah, I happen to mention sex as if it's no big deal, right? Those are kind of signs that someone is more sex positive, more comfortable with these things. So making sure you're looking out for those friendships and cultivating them and spending more time with those folks can help you start to unlearn some of the negative stuff that's like, oh, wait a minute, there is another perspective out there. So I think, just being mindful of what you are absorbing out there. So those are my two first tips for people.
I love that. It's so important. I love these tips that you gave us to notice the thoughts. We talked about really noticing all the different things that come up, but our thoughts can really be heavy and really can contribute to just discomfort in all different aspects, right? Like that pain or the discomfort in our bodies and our emotions. And to be able to practice mindfulness, I loved that image of just kind of seeing your thought, noticing it, and then just letting it go for now, right? Because it'll come back.
Sure, absolutely.
It's going to come back. But the more that we practice that kind of activity of really noticing it, but not judging it and not putting too much weight on it, then it's easier to let it go and just come back to the present moment and be really in tune with what's going on. And I just love, love, love that second tip of noticing what you're surrounding yourself with, right? So if it can be just such an amazing shift, and a tiny one at that, of starting to really be intentional about the things that you are consuming, whether it's social media, all the different things. There's so many different things that come at us throughout our day, and to be intentional to surround yourself with people who are positive and people who are uplifting and empowering, and messages as well. So being smart in your consumerism.
Yeah. To really notice how it makes you feel. Pay attention to what makes you feel good about your sexuality, your body, what makes you feel shame or discomfort.
Right.
And listen to those feelings.
Tell us where we can find you. Actually, before we get to our this or that, tell us where we can find you online, on social media. How do we get in touch with you?
Sure. The best place to find me is my website, sexualempowermentschool.com. And if you're ready to begin to explore and figure out what might be getting your way of more pleasure, I have a free quiz there. That's the great place to start.
Ooh, I love that.
It helps you identify what's blocking you from experiencing more pleasure, and then gives you a tip and resource tailored to you to help you get started on your journey. So I think that's the best place.
Yes, and we love quizzes. Quizzes are fun.
Yeah, it's a fun, few minutes, and, you get some great resources at the end. So that's, I'd say, the best place to find me and the best way to get started. Also on Instagram and TikTok at Sexual Empowerment School, if you want to see my cheesy videos and attempts to dance and use silly audio. So if you want a good laugh with some education, check those out.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay. So that is sexualempowermentschool.com, and on Instagram, Sexual Empowerment School. And that is with Dr. Lindsey Brooks. Thank you, Lindsey. All right. So getting to our this or that. Number one, this or that. Tell us what you choose and a little reason why. Okay. VH1 or MTV?
VH1. Because back in the day when I would watch those, they would have more of the classic old videos and music. So for me, that was when I was growing up in the 90s. I loved music from the 60s and 70s. And so they would show more of that kind of stuff, which I loved. So I was always waiting for the Beatles documentary to come.
Oh, did you see the newest?
I did, yeah.
Loved it. Yes, and it's funny when even the question VH1 or MTV, people in the generation now probably don't even know.
They don't know what that is.
What we're talking about. We're showing our age.
Yeah.
Okay, number two, taming the tresses, blow dry or air dry?
Air dry for sure. I'm a naturally curly girl, and I'm a big believer in letting them out.
Letting them air dry, yes.
Yeah.
You have a lovely beachy wave. Okay, last one. Number 3, this or that. Vacation or staycation?
I love them both, but if I had to pick, I'd say vacation. I like to explore a new place and have a new experience.
Okay.
But I also find staycations very rejuvenating. So I advocate for both.
What would be your dream vacation? Your dream vacation.
Beach is my dream vacation. So I would say Hawaii.
Oh, me too. I love Hawaii. Yay. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Lindsey. I had a blast reconnecting with you. Thank you, listeners, for sticking around and listening to this really important conversation. I invite you to reach out to Lindsey or to me if you have questions about this. You want to, something came up for you. You can find us both on Instagram and at our website. Mine is drliz.com, and Lindsey again is at sexualempowermentschool.com. We would love to answer any questions that you might have or reactions that you might have to this topic, to this very important conversation that we have had today. We invite you to share this episode with someone who you think may benefit from it. And as always, I would love if you have a few extra minutes that if you could give us a 5-star rating on whatever podcast platform you are listening to. And if you have an extra couple of seconds, if you could review it, we'd love to hear just what you would like to see us talk about in the future, because that is the point of this podcast, is to be empowering, be inspiring, to help you feel well, body, mind, heart, soul, and spirit, and to really deliver meaningful tips and strategies in everyday language. So thank you so much for listening. Again, thank you, Lindsey. Thank you for joining me. And I look forward to reconnecting with you in the future.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been so much fun.
Thank you again for listening. I cannot wait to connect with you at the next episode. Take care. Thank you for connecting on this episode of the podcast, Empowered by Design. For further connection, subscribe to my email list at drliz.com to be sure that you are in the loop for exciting news, events, and resources. You can also follow me on social media at Dr. Liz and at Visionistas by Design. I invite you to subscribe to this podcast and send this episode to one of your people in order to share the love, spread the power. This podcast is designed to inspire, educate, and empower you to pursue your dreams with intentional vision. This podcast is not meant to be a substitute for psychological treatment or a working relationship with a licensed mental health professional. For more information on connecting with mental health resources in your area, visit drliz.com and click on resources. Thank you again for connecting, and remember, trust the heart, work your vision, dream, design, deliver.